For years, Joanna Moore was seen as a glamorous Hollywood star, but behind that image, there were secrets no one talked about. Now, at 62, her daughter Tatum O'Neal is finally speaking out, revealing shocking and deeply troubling claims about her mother's hidden life. From secret affairs to disturbing allegations that raise serious questions, this story uncovers a side of Hollywood that was kept in the shadows for years. What really happened behind closed doors? In this video, we reveal the truth that is changing everything. On November 10th, 1934 in Georgia, Dorothy Joanne Cook was born into what seemed like a warm and complete little family. With her parents and younger sister, her early life carried a quiet sense of comfort, something that would soon be shattered in a way no child could ever understand. At just 7 years old, Dorothy stayed behind one day while her family went out for a drive. It was a small twist of fate that changed everything. A devastating car accident took the lives of her mother and sister instantly. Her father survived, but only for a short while. Injured and weakened, he held on as long as he could, but before the year ended, he too was gone. In a matter of months, Dorothy lost everyone she called home. For a brief time, her grandmother stepped in, offering what little stability she could, but age and circumstance made it impossible for that arrangement to last. Once again, the young girl faced uncertainty until a local family took her in. Their kindness came with one unusual request. Dorothy would leave her old name behind and become Joanna. It wasn't just a change of identity, it was a quiet attempt to begin again after unimaginable loss. Yet even that fragile sense of belonging didn't hold. At 16, Joanna made a sudden, impulsive decision. She left her comfortable home, married a teenage boy named Willis Moore, and stepped into adulthood far too soon. The marriage quickly unraveled, ending within a year. What remained, however, was the name she would carry forward, Joanna Moore. Determined to reshape her life, she enrolled at Agnes Scott College. There, it wasn't academics that drew attention, but her striking presence. That attention led her toward a beauty pageant, where she won a Georgia title, an unexpected turning point. Soon after, Hollywood began to call, and at a simple cocktail party, her next chapter quietly began. It almost felt like something lifted straight from a Hollywood script. At a party one evening, Joanna Moore caught the attention of a studio producer who saw something in her, something worth testing. A screen test followed, and soon after, Universal Studios signed her. For a moment, it seemed as though fate was finally offering her a chance to rewrite her story. Television roles came first, small steps into an uncertain future. But before her film career could properly begin, Joanna repeated a pattern she couldn't quite escape. In a rush of emotion, she entered another impulsive marriage, this time to fellow actor Don Orek. Like her first, the union barely survived a year. Two short-lived marriages had left their mark, and it became painfully clear that if she wanted stability, she would have to find it in her work. That opportunity came the same year her second marriage ended. Joanna landed her first leading role in the film Appointment with a Shadow. It should have been her breakthrough, but instead, it faltered. Critics were unimpressed, with one review dismissing it as dull and lifeless. The disappointment wasn't entirely hers to carry, but in Hollywood, perception mattered more than fairness. One misstep could echo loudly. She tried to recover, taking smaller roles in films like Slim Carter, hoping momentum would build. But the parts were minor, the impact even smaller. Nothing seemed to stick. Frustration quietly crept in, and once again, she returned to the place where luck had once found her, a cocktail party. There, she met producer Albert Zugsmith, a man known for modest, often forgettable films. At first, it didn't sound promising. Joanna needed something big, something that would finally set her apart. But this time, Zugsmith had something different, a project that carried unexpected weight. The film was Touch of Evil, starring Charlton Heston and Janet Leigh, and directed by the legendary Orson Welles. Suddenly, Joanna found herself on the edge of something far greater than she had imagined. There was just one small compromise. She had to darken her blonde hair to avoid clashing with Leigh's look. It seemed like a small price to pay for a place in such a production, but the set was far from welcoming. Nervous and eager, Joanna made an innocent mistake, sitting in Wells's chair. His reaction was sharp and humiliating, leaving her shaken. Raised with Southern manners, she wasn't used to such harshness, and the moment lingered longer than it should have. The tension didn't end there. Charlton Heston reportedly took a strong interest in her, an attention she didn't welcome. Navigating those moments required quiet strength, and more than once, she had to carefully pull herself away from uncomfortable situations. When filming wrapped, all that remained was hope. Hope that this film, this one, would finally change everything. But at an early screening in Los Angeles, the reaction was cold. The audience didn't connect, and even those involved expressed doubts. For Joanna, it felt like yet another door closing. Ironically, Touch of Evil would later be recognized as a classic, praised for its style and ambition. But at the time, that future meant nothing. For Joanna Moore, it was simply another uncertain chapter in a career that refused to find steady ground. And with each passing setback, it seemed she was being pushed further away from the spotlight she had fought so hard to reach. By 1958, Joanna Moore finally secured another leading role, but it came in Monster on the Campus, a strange horror story about a professor transformed into a primitive creature after exposure to ancient blood. It was the kind of film that drew curiosity, not respect, and it did little to elevate her reputation as a serious actress. Television, however, offered her something different: consistency, even appreciation. She appeared on well-known shows like The Rifleman and Perry Mason, where her presence began to resonate with audiences, yet even there, danger found her. While filming Route 66, a scene in the ocean turned frighteningly real when her foot became trapped between rocks. At first, her struggle looked like acting, until the crew realized it wasn't. She was pulled out, shaken and numb, another close call in a life already marked by instability. Despite becoming a familiar face on television, Joanna still longed for one defining film role, the kind that could finally steady her drifting career. In 1962, Joanna Moore finally found a role that allowed her to leave a lasting impression. In Walk on the Wild Side, she played Miss Precious, a fragile, troubled woman whose quiet intensity lingered long after her scenes ended. Though it wasn't a leading role, it carried a depth that audiences noticed. Moore later reflected that this performance brought her more fan mail than any other, a quiet sign that she was finally being seen. Still, the success came wrapped in disappointment. The film itself divided critics, but it gave Joanna something she had long been chasing: a name. And that name soon placed her opposite Elvis Presley in Follow That Dream. On screen, their story stayed light, almost playful, but behind the scenes, it was anything but simple. Joanna would later reveal that Presley's attention toward her felt intense, even overwhelming at times. What began as admiration soon turned complicated, especially as his focus shifted elsewhere. The situation left her emotionally shaken, caught between longing and rejection. Those close to Presley spoke of tense encounters and uneasy moments. Joanna, already carrying the scars of a turbulent past, seemed to spiral into another emotional storm, one where affection blurred into desperation, and then, in a moment that stunned those around her, she made a chilling claim. She said that she had just taken a handful of sleeping pills. And that wasn't all she said. As if the situation couldn't grow more chaotic, Joanna Moore made a startling claim. She insisted she was carrying Elvis Presley's child. Concerned by her fragile state, Joe Esposito chose not to involve Presley and instead rushed her to the hospital. Doctors treated her for the pills she had taken, but found no sign of a pregnancy. What remained was the quiet collapse of a relationship that had already spun out of control. In search of stability, Joanna turned towards something gentler: television. She joined The Andy Griffith Show, one of America's most beloved programs, where Andy Griffith played the warm, dependable Sheriff Andy Taylor. Stepping into the role of Nurse Peggy McMillan, Joanna brought a soft charm that audiences immediately embraced. For a brief moment, it felt like she had finally found her place. And yet, just as quickly as she arrived, she was gone, after only 4 episodes. The sudden exit puzzled viewers, but whispers behind the scenes told a more complicated story. Rumors surfaced, later echoed by Don Knotts, suggesting that Joanna and Griffith had grown too close off-camera. With Griffith married at the time, the situation may have created tensions that the network quietly chose to resolve by letting her go. But even that controversy soon faded beside something far more serious. Around the same period, Joanna experienced a frightening medical crisis. She suddenly lost her hearing. Doctors diagnosed her with otosclerosis, a condition that threatened to end her career entirely. For most actors, it would have been the end. For Joanna, it became another battle. Refusing to walk away, she taught herself to read lips, relying on scripts and careful observation to follow scenes. When she couldn't hear the director's cue, a simple tap on the shoulder became her signal to begin. To those around her, she hid it well. Few even realized what she was enduring, but determination alone wasn't enough. This fragile system, lip reading and silent cues, couldn't sustain her forever. Joanna Moore needed something more permanent, something that could truly bring her world of sound back. A year after losing her hearing, Joanna Moore was given a fragile sense of hope. Doctors believed surgery might restore what she had lost. In 1962, she underwent the operation, and remarkably, her hearing returned. It felt like a second chance, arriving just in time. Soon after, the phone rang with an opportunity she couldn't ignore. Walt Disney Pictures wanted her for a major sequel. Following the success of The Absent-Minded Professor, the studio was moving ahead with Son of Flubber. The film became a hit, and for a brief moment, it seemed Joanna's long, uneven journey was finally turning in her favor. But just as her career began to rise, her personal life took a complicated turn. She met Ryan O'Neal, a charming young actor several years her junior. Their romance moved quickly, and on April 3rd, 1963, they married, quietly carrying a secret. Joanna was already expecting a child. Just 5 months later, their daughter, Tatum O'Neal, was born. From the outside, they appeared to be a picture-perfect Hollywood family. But beneath that image, something far more fragile was beginning to take shape. Joanna Moore's marriage to Ryan O'Neal was troubled almost from the start. Their home, which should have been filled with promise, instead echoed with arguments, loud, bitter, and frequent. As O'Neal's career began to rise with his role in Peyton Place, Joanna's own path seemed to slip further out of reach. The imbalance only deepened the strain between them. What followed was a painful unraveling. During one of the darkest moments in their relationship, O'Neal reportedly found Joanna unconscious in a bathtub, a glass of wine, and barbiturates within reach. It was a chilling image, one that shattered whatever fragile hope remained between them. Yet even amid the chaos, life moved forward. In 1964, they welcomed a second child, their son, Griffin O'Neal, but the new arrival brought no healing. By 1967, the marriage had collapsed completely. Determined to protect his children, O'Neal sought custody, but the fight was shorter than expected. When their daughter Tatum O'Neal was 7 and Griffin 6, Joanna made a heartbreaking decision. She brought them to their father herself. Acknowledging her struggles, she stepped away and entered treatment, hoping to regain control over her life. Yet what seemed like a difficult but responsible choice would later reveal a different kind of tragedy. In the years that followed, both children spoke openly about the instability they faced with their father. Tatum described growing up surrounded by chaos, while Griffin painted an even harsher picture. Even O'Neal himself would later admit his shortcomings as a parent. When Joanna completed treatment, she fought to bring her children back into her care. For a moment, it appeared as though she might finally be turning a corner, but the hope was short-lived. The deeper issues remained unresolved, and the life she tried to rebuild quickly slipped back into disorder. Her children would later recall those years with painful clarity, days marked by neglect, scarcity, and uncertainty. They spoke of hunger, of going without basic needs, of a home that felt unstable and unsafe. And yet, even those memories hinted at something darker still, something far more troubling than hardship alone. As Joanna Moore struggled to hold her life together, the world inside her home grew increasingly unstable. She allowed a stream of boyfriends into her children's lives, one of them shockingly young, closer in age to her daughter than to herself. It created a deeply unsettling environment where boundaries blurred and stability disappeared. While Joanna drifted through parties and distractions, her young daughter, Tatum O'Neal, was often left to navigate the chaos alone. In moments that felt more like quiet cries for attention than rebellion, Tatum would wander through the house, sipping from abandoned glasses, mimicking the adults around her. Childhood slipped away too quickly in a home where guidance was scarce. Years later, she would speak openly about those days, describing a mother consumed by substances, unpredictable in mood, and surrounded by people who sometimes brought fear instead of comfort. The danger wasn't only emotional. Some of the men who entered their lives were harsh, even violent, leaving lasting scars on both Tatum and her brother, Griffin O'Neal. What had once been a fragile household became a place of real risk. Eventually, the outside world took notice. One evening, after a tense confrontation during a visit to Ryan O'Neal, Joanna made a reckless decision. She drove while intoxicated, with the children in her care. She was stopped by the police, and that moment became a turning point. The courts intervened, removing the children from her custody and placing them with their father. It was a devastating loss, one that marked the end of her role as their primary caregiver. As her personal life unraveled, her career followed. Work became scarce, and financial strain set in. By the late 1970s, the contrast between mother and daughter was striking. While Joanna faded from the spotlight, young Tatum rose to extraordinary heights, even winning an Academy Award for Paper Moon. In a painful twist, Joanna found herself relying on her daughter's success for support, a reversal that carried its own quiet humiliation, yet the downward spiral didn't stop. Her struggles with addiction continued, leading to repeated arrests for driving under the influence. Then came a tragic accident that cost her 3 fingers. Another physical reminder of how far things had fallen. Still, she carried on in fragments, taking occasional television roles and even entering another marriage, as though trying to piece together a life that no longer held. But in 1996, a final, unforgiving chapter began. Joanna was diagnosed with lung cancer, a battle far greater than any she had faced before. Within a year, her strength gave way. In November 1997, at the age of 63, Joanna Moore passed away.